and lead a short discussion before we open up questions to the audience. If you have a question that you would like to put to our panelists, just type it in the chat and I'll collect those and pass them along to the participants towards the end of the hour. And before we start, I just want to offer a quick word of thanks to Victoria Baum, who has generously volunteered to interpret for our poet tonight via closed captioning. So please make sure that closed captioning is enabled if you are using Zoom. And I will also be posting some links in the chat, which will direct you to pages where you can find more information on the situation in Belarus, and also places where you can donate. Thank you very much. And now, Valzhyna, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Larissa, and thank you, Pen Translation Series. Thank you, New Yorker Poets Cafe and Olivia for organizing this event. The world outside of the English language is large and it's full of stories. And today we will hear 3 Belarusian poets who we welcome in this virtual space, as we welcome all of you watching us around the world, and we're looking forward to our conversation. Since the fraudulent Belarusian presidential election in August 2020, thousands of peaceful people have been detained, tortured, and some even killed, including a Belarusian visual artist and art teacher, Roman Bondarenko. The authoritarian regime is waging a sadistic and human crackdown on all forms of truth. Anybody who calls violence, violence, broken bones, is persecuted. In the situation where the independent media is at the mercy of the state and is not really allowed to be independent, writers, journalists, publishers, and cultural workers have become targets of illegal detentions and sentencings. Some 600 cases of rights violations against cultural community have been recorded over the last year. This new year has already started with new detentions. Every morning, I wake up to news of more people from the cultural community in Belarus who were disappeared by the Belarusian police. Among the targets of this cultural crackdown are many people I know and love personally. One of them, Hanna Komar, would be with us today as a translator. Poet and musician Ulad Lyankevich, Serjuk Medvedev, scholar and public intellectual Olga Shparaga, outstanding journalist Yulia Slutskaya, who was detained in front of her grandchildren at the airport. Poet Dmitry Strotsev had a bag pulled over his head as he was returning home from running an errand. Alexander Vasilievich, the owner of an art gallery and co-owner of several newspapers, where all of us present in today's discussion have read and published, has been in detention since summer. Lawyer Maxim Znak has been in detention for months and he has been writing poetry in jail. Translator Volha Hronskaja, who translates from English Margaret Atwood and Virginia Woolf are her authors. She's an English teacher who is facing bogus criminal charges. A whole national theater has gone underground. A large number of journalists are in detention simply for doing their job. Just this week, a 15-year-old blogger got a 3-year sentence. He's currently the youngest political prisoner in Belarus. Since it's an event that highlights translation, let me say that detention is a word that might be lost in translation here, since most people are not detained, but kidnapped, captured by men with faces hidden under black ski hats without any introductions or explanations. No evidence in your favor is considered during trials. Recently, a released journalist described not knowing what was happening to her until she found herself among 15 women in a 5-person cell. They had to beg for toilet paper and soap, had no mattresses, no change of clothes. The guard who gave them toothpaste, they felt so grateful to him that they called him their Santa Claus. Protesters might also be a word that is lost in translation here. Recently, when a detained 65-year-old woman was asked by police why she had gone to the protest, she responded, a protest is an organized event with speeches and proclamations. I was walking with a friend in my city. We saw a man whose eyes were full of tear gas. We stopped to help him and were arrested. Another man got a 15-day sentence because he confessed to supporting the protests in his thoughts. Well, today we will try to get into the thoughts of 3 Belarusian poets and translators. I'm going to introduce them right now. I'm very happy to welcome them here. Volha Hronskaja is a Belarusian poet, translator, and literary critic. Her first book of poetry was published in 2013. In 2019, Volha received the Golden Apostrophe Award, as well as the Magdalena Radziwiłł Scholarship. As a translator from German, she has published 2 books, selected poems of Georg Heim and Daniel Kellman's novel Tea. She lives in Minsk, and it is Volha's poem that we're going to discuss today. Hanna Komar is a Belarusian poet and translator. Her first book of poetry was published in 2016, and it got shortlisted for several literary awards. Her second collection, called Recycled, was published in a bilingual Belarusian English edition in London in 2017. Hanna has translated the poetry of Charles Bukowski, as well as the poetry of British and American women poets. She works at the Belarusian Pen Center and lives in Minsk. And last but not least, our third poet and our second translator, Maryja Marticevic, poet, essayist, translator. One of her many literary projects is a book series called Amerikanka, which publishes translations of American literature into Belarusian. Maryja is the author of 3 poetry collections, the latest one of which received the Book of the Year Award and the Best Poetry Book of the Year Award in 2018. She lives in Minsk. So we will begin here. I see Volha's face and Hanna's face. Is Maryja here? Here's Maryja. I see her too. Wonderful. So I know that somebody, one of the organizers, is going to share the poem and the translations as we read. And so now we will begin with our poem. Volha, would you please read it? Volha, калі ласка, мы пачнем з вашага верша. Прачытайце яго для нас.
Так, добрый вечер. Ці добрый день. Сэрца маёй краіны замерла, не ідзе. У яго блакады поўныя і частковыя розных формаў свабоды, падоўжаны інтэрвал затрымання, парушэнне правоў і праводнасці перадачы, недастатковасць сумлення, недахоп любові. Але я думаю, думаць пакуль яшчэ можна, дзе яна, сэрца краіны? І знаходжу яго ў іншым месцы. У дварах і на плошчах, між рэбраў нашай паэзіі, у сябе за грудзінай. Я напаўняю яго любоўю, пераступаю парог і боюсь, стаю на сваім і на месцы, спыняю рух па наезджанай каляіне, каб яно, сэрца маёй краіны, ішло.
Дякую великі. Thank you very much, Volha. And so you could see the original Belarusian poem in front of you, and you see two translations. How about then we start, Hanna, with you, since yours is first, and then Maryja would read hers. And then I would ask Volha first to talk a bit about this poem and about its context.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. The heart of my country has stopped. It isn't beating. It has blocks, complete and partial, of various types of freedom, an extended detention interval, rights and care packages aren't conducted. It has conscious failure and deficiency of love. But I wonder, it's not forbidden yet. Where is it, the heart of my country? And I find it elsewhere, in the yards and in the squares, between the ribs of our poetry, behind my sternum. I fill it with love, cross the doorstep and fear, stand my ground and just stand, stop the movement on the beaten track, to start the heart of my country.
Thank you so much, Hanna. Maryja. You're still muted.
Sorry. Hello. The heart of my country has stopped. It isn't beating. It has blocks, complete and partial. Oh, sorry. That's not my translation, sorry. Sorry. Oh.
But Maryja, this is exactly what translation is, right? We take somebody's poem and we read it as ours.
Yes.
So, sorry. Metaphor. This is a great metaphor for what we do.
Yes, okay. So once again, the heart of my country is arrested, failed. It bears full or partial block of all kinds of liberty. It has chronic attacks, collapse of truth, dysfunction of love, its law broken. But I often wonder, wondering is still allowed, where is the heart of my country? I'm finding it elsewhere. It is in streets and inside quarters, in the body of our poetry, in my own rib cage. I pump it with love, step over the pain threshold, stand up and on mine, throw myself off my stride to make the heart of my country tell tale.
Oh, thank you so much, Volha, Hanna, and Maryja. It's listening to you three made me realize that this is really symbolic, the way that this poem invites us to breathe together, right? Kind of to check our heartbeats against each other, against other people's heartbeats. So I would like to start with a question to Volha. I would like for her to tell us a bit about the context of this poem. I understand that it is unbearably difficult to speak from a situation where all of our senses are under assault. And it is remarkable that a poet can overcome this muteness. Volga, could you please tell us a bit about how this poem came into being and how you managed to overcome that speechlessness that the events in Belarus plunge all of us into? Вольга, я запрашаю вас расказаць нам крыху пра гэты верш. Я кажу, што я разумею, наколькі цяжка знайсці словы і размаўляць з сітуацыі, калі усе нашы адчуванні знаходзяцца пад гвалтам. Калі ласка, раскажыце, як з'явіўся гэты верш, які яго кантэкст, што б вы хацелі расказаць чытачам, асабліва амерыканскім чытачам гэтага верша, для якіх тое, што адбываецца зараз у Беларусі, гучыць як нейкі кашмар, як страшная казка, як, магчыма, нешта, што адбылося 100 гадоў назад.
Так, ну, кантэкст быў агульны для нас усіх, для ўсіх беларусаў, безумоўна, гэта была восень, пасля тых жахлівых падзеяў жніўня і з тымі восеньскімі перажываннямі і сінусоідамі, па якіх мы ўсе жылі, фактычна то ўздым з надзеяй нейкай, то чарговае падзенне ўніз і разняверванне. І калі гаварыць пра канкрэтны нейкі час ці пра канкрэтны штуршок, то гэты верш з'явіўся у той момант, калі ішлі размовы пра ўсеагульную забастоўку, пра тое, што, можа быць, вось зараз мы спынім краіну і такім чынам усё зменім усю сітуацыю, так, і вось праз гэтае ісці, спыніцца, знайшлася пэўная, не тое, каб ідэя такая лагічная абсалютна, но але штосьці вось нарадзілася ўнутры і вырасла. Тады восенню, якраз вось жнівень і восень, гэта той час, калі я гэты кантэкст неяк перажывала ці пераапрацоўвала ўнутры ў вершах. Цяпер якраз надышоў вось гэты час такога маўчання, калі насамрэч неяк цяжка пра гэта ўсё гаварыць, але тады словы дапамагалі, тады яны нейкім чынам ратавалі і, можа быць, наколькі я магу меркаваць, былі і для кагосьці таксама важны.
Дякую велике. Thank you so much. I hope that you can all follow the subtitles here, the closed captions on our screen. It's true that poetry is all about breath, right? It's all about breathing, the inhale, the exhale. That's iamb. That's also the rhythm of our heart. And then very interesting the way Volha describes the situation where there is an expectation of a national strike, of a great stopping of everything that is happening in the country, and how one feels it physically and privately and intimately inside her own body as a poet, as a citizen. Well, then I would like to hear from our poets, or from our translators, the poets and translators. The versions are quite different, and I would get to that a bit later. But first, I would like to ask Hanna and Maryja, how did you respond to the poem when you read it first? Volha is talking about muteness and this need to find words, this sense that words do help breathe forward, move on. How did you respond to these words? Did you feel that they also support you? And how was it then to work with this poem in a language that is foreign to you, to rewrite it, to do what Maryja just did by reading somebody else's poem as her own, embodying it?
Yeah, I can say that words do help sometimes. I actually think that in my case, words help me now more than they did help back in the autumn, because back in the autumn I could neither write nor read anything, and no poetry, nothing except for news, right, and reports, and this is why I think I was happy to be translating the poem, because it gave me the chance, because when you translate it, you have to delve right into the poem, and you have to feel it and listen to it and breathe with it. And I was happy to be translating it because it gave me the chance to be breathing and to be feeling, to let myself feel not just read the news, but actually let myself stop for a minute as well and realize what I am experiencing as a human being, not just as a citizen, but as a human being who has all kinds of controversial feelings about it. Вольха, я сказала, что у восени я как раз-таки не могла особо адчуваць нічога і не чытаць, і паэзіі не магла, а цяпер магу, і што я была вельмі рада перакладаць гэты верш, тому што пакуль я яго перакладала, я магла таксама дазволіць сабе адчуваць все гэтыя супярэчлівыя, все гэтыя супярэчлівыя пачуцці.
Maryja, how about you?
I'm sorry. First of all, I'm sorry for at least one visible mistake in my spelling and in the writing of this book translation. As for the poem, I have read this poem by Volha only now in the winter because too much information came during the fall about everything. Too huge amount of poetry, essays, feedbacks, and I had to track it actually as a PEN Belarus member. So I went through this material, used to go through this material mostly as a literature functioner. And now when I saw this poem, it was like trying to open it to people who would read it in English. So I was really, I wanted to feel it with everything I felt about Belarus. That's why maybe the translation of mine is quite free. It's not really, it doesn't go directly after what Volga really wrote. And I also want to ask her about elsewhere, because this elsewhere for me is puzzle, because we don't find the place where the heart is, because probably it was really great enigma for me, sorry, not mistake, to understand where Olga considers the heart to be. In the prison, maybe stolen and captured by somebody in a palace. Ольга, я сказала, что я прачытала твой верш толькі зімой перад тым, як перакладаць, бо восень сачыла хутчэй за аб'ёмам усёй інфармацыі з гледзяшча крытыкі, функцыянеркі літаратуры, якая збірала гэтыя сведчанні для ПН Беларусь, для беларускага ПНу. І таму, калі я побачила яго, я адчула адказнасць, місію перадаць усё, што ёсць у гэтым тэксце, што я адчула амерыканскаму, ангельскаму моўнаму чытачу. Але таксама была для мяне одна загадка, одно пытанне твоим вершам. Я там бачу такі вялікі эліпс. Там есть слово у іншым месцы, тое, што я і Ганна пераклалі як elsewhere, як бы даслоўны пераклад гэтага. Вось ты не кажаш, у якім месцы насамрэч сэрца, дзе яно схавана ці скрадзена, куды, дзе where the heart, дзе сэрца? Оля.
Паўсюль.
Ты кажаш, што яно паўсюль, але у іншым месцы, так? Но не ў якім. Мне такое ўражанне, што тут вось як бы я гэта адчула як недамоўленасць, што яго скралі ў нас, гэтае сэрца, ці яно як бы у палоне. I felt this elsewhere as the heart is stolen, captured, arrested actually, what is the second line of my... Yes.
Пераклад гэта вельмі цікавы досвед, ён прымушае задумацца аўтара пра тое, што ж ён хацеў сказаць вось нейкім там сваім радком. Таму на самой справе напэўна, і так. То бок і паўсюль, і нідзе, і скрадзенае, і ўсё адразу. То бок дзякую вось за новы кантэкст і за новае разуменне таго, што там ёсць.
Thank you so much. I'm glad that we did not solve the poem and that we could keep on looking for the heart. And as we look, we keep on breathing, inhaling and exhaling. Maryja said that she herself noticed that her version is different from Hanna's, and she used that word free, that her translation is free. And I would like to say that I hope that all translations are free. I hope that all poems are free. And because I think that a writer and a translator is also a writer, is not there to pinpoint, to capture a word, but rather to release it. And here we have Volha's poem, and we have two versions that release this poem into the English language, but they also release this poem into two different hearts, into Hanna's heart, into Maryja's heart. So I would like to look at them too and to hear from our translators about their approach to translation, their philosophy of translation in this particular case. Вольга, я кажу, што мы будем спадзявацца, што ўсе пераклады і ўсе вершы свабодныя, што мы заўсёды паэтка вызваляе словы. І таму мы зараз паразмаўляем пра розныя філасофіі да перакладу, да падыходу, да гэтага верша. Hanna, I believe that your translation is emphasizing how lyrical Volha's poem is. It focuses on emotion, on looking for words and trying to find words for this very deep emotion, sensation of helplessness, solidarity, fear, anger, perhaps. So the focus is on lyricism. And in this way, this poem in English reads to me in a tradition of, for instance, translations of Pablo Neruda's poems into English. While it seems that Maryja, your translation is really interested in language and how we construct meaning with language. So you seem to be very interested in this contrast between the language of violence and the language of the body, particularly of the language of a heart block, heart attack. I went to Wikipedia. I know very little about medical issues, so I went to Wikipedia and I read about the heart block and the heart attack. And I was just amazed at how metaphorical the language of the heart is and the language of these heart diseases is. So it seemed that you are more in the tradition of, I would say, grotesque, which is such an Eastern European tradition. This is something that makes me think of Wisława Szymborska's poems in English translation, perhaps Gennady Gor, the poet of the siege of Leningrad, which is the word siege, blockade, is very important in this poem about the blockade in Belarusian blokada is a word, the same word as blockade and siege of a place. So would you speak to us about your decision here, about your approach to this poem? How did you decide on emphasizing lyricism, emotion, or the contrast, the grotesque between these different forms of talking about body and violence. I'm really interested in hearing from you here.
Okay, I can start perhaps. I decided to stick to the original as much as I could. It was a bit challenging because it does have quite a few medical terms, and there is a lot of wordplay around it, right? And so I wanted to only say in English what Volha said in Belarusian, at least what I thought she said in Belarusian, and let the reader ask questions. So I didn't want to give ready-made answers and ready-made interpretations to the reader, also because I knew that the reader would have a chance to ask questions. I only wanted to translate what Volha said, actually, right? And to even keep the form, and very often I managed to even keep the length of the lines the same. And so as you Valzhyna say, so the reader can breathe at the same, so to say, rhythm, right, and pace. Yeah, I thought it had enough play, the original had enough play, and I didn't want to impose any of my own interpretation, although still it sounds more lyrical, and this is my regular style, yeah, as a poet as well. But also I wanted to give that feeling of that contradiction, of that inner conflict that I do feel in the poem, and that I do feel as a poet and citizen now living in Belarus. So for me, because for me it's a poem about this, controversial feeling of you have to do something, but also you can't do something, and you want to be a poet, but you need to be a citizen as well, and all these complicated feelings. So that's how it is. Вольга, я трымалася вашего арыгінала як могла. Для мне вось хацелася вельмі не інтэрпрэтаваць верш, а менавіта перакласць яго, і каб чытачы самі маглі считать и зразумець и задать пытанні.
Thank you, Hanna. Maryja, could you please talk about your decisions? I really love that word that Hanna used, contradictions. I think that it's a word that is very important, an idea that is very important to your translation. Correct me if I'm wrong here. And perhaps you could address the line breaks a bit here and the lines why your translation is shorter.
Actually, I'm sorry, at the beginning it was just a mistake of not having time for edition. I will send you better translation with more lines. And at the end, I was focused on keeping the quote, like the end of the line, to use a proverb there. I will get to it later. Actually, Valzhyna, you were quite right about my approach, because I more or less I know how Hanna translates, and I really wanted, if I would translate the poem, for instance, for publication, and I would know that I am the only one translator, the text would be completely different, I think, because actually we are battling, we are competing in translation, and so I really wanted to show that old school of poetry translation. Maybe it would die with us, so let's just watch at it. And yes, actually you were right about Polish poetry. My inspiration here was the last book by Zbigniew Herbert, Epilog Burzy, where an old poet actually plays with all kinds of metaphors of disease and body of poetry, and also the heart attack is also a part of that playing. And second inspiration, it's not really, it's a nice story because 8 years ago my father had her very bad heart attack, and all family was really in need. And since that time I know all metaphors of heart, and actually the heart of my father is something I'm really thinking about every day. When the weather is bad or when there is a COVID pandemic, I always think about my father's heart. So it's really personal for me. And this is why I decided to use all word playings I could find and put it here. Maybe I understand that maybe I should use it not in such big amount, too much salt. I agree with it. And there is a question in our chat about the last word, about the last line. If the allusion to Edgar Poe is, did I choose to allude to Edgar Allan Poe? Yes, I put here this allusion just to be a kind of hooligan, poet translator hooligan, because I felt I have to keep the last proverb, because Volha uses the word ishlo, it to make it go on. But when I was putting go on here, I heard Celine Dion, so it was really bad for me, I think. And my English is too weak, and I couldn't understand if I can put here just go. And if you tell me that it's okay, I think that go is the best closing for this poem, because Volha wants, she stands to make the heart go. It's like contradiction and homonymia in the end of this poem. But actually, I put telltale here also to put my own understanding of what is going on in Belarus, because this, maybe it's revenge, yes, of this heart. Maybe I want to make it more fierce, yes, maybe not to be so big, and that's what I wanted to put here, yes, that the heart must blame people who do violence. That's my interpretation. And thank you for your questions, and put more. I'm going just to retell a little bit for Volha. Воля, я сказала, что меня натхняла, сапраўды, Вальжына правильно адчула, што тут ёсць штосьці ад перакладу польскай паэзіі на ангельскую мову Вяслава Шамборска вывучала, і рускай таксама паэзіі з гэтымі вось гульнямі блакады, так, словаў. Я натхнялася конкретно Збігневым Гербертам, его апошняй кніжкай, дзе стары паэт піша пра сваё сэрца хворае, таксама, ну, пра сваё хворае цела, так, паміранне свайго цела. І таксама гэта асабістая гісторыя, тому што мне бацька перанёс інфаркт, каранарнае шунтаванне, і я вельмі добра ведаю тэматыку сардэчных хваробаў. Праз гэта, ну, таму я як бы старалася ўсё, што я ведаю, укласці ў пераклад. Вось. І, канешне, у канцы ёсць пытанне ўжо адразу ў чаце, пытаюцца наконт апошняга слова. Я пабаялася напісаць go on, каб не атрымалася, Титанік не атрымаўся. І не ведала, баялася напісаць штосьці іншае, каб, бо моя ангельская мова все-таки не native speaker, так? І я напісала telltale, тому што гэта цытата, это алюзія на Эдгара Аллана По, на сэрца, которое выкрывае, на гэты твор. Оно называецца A Telltale Heart па-ангельску. Ну і таму амерыканскі слухач адразу разумее, што вось, ну, як бы тут крыху змяніўся кантэкст. Сэрца не проста ідзея, но яшчэ і, калі памёр арганізм, яно яшчэ і, ну, як бы, яшчэ і здае, паказвае на злачынства, скажем так. Ну, ты разумееш гэты, ты ведаеш гэты твор. І, канешне, гэта хуліганства. літаратурнае, і я згодная пасля параду слухачоў паставіць сюды тое, што ў цябе, то есть go on, go, вось, то есть тое апошняе слово. Вось такая гісторыя.
Thank you so much, Maryja. Thank you to everybody. Please keep on sending your questions. We're really hoping that this would be a conversation between the Belarusian poets and the whole world. And I would just like to say to Maryja that she should not worry. We should have, of course, a lot of versions of the same poem, of the same text, since poetry is all about a conversation. A poem is always en route, looking for a listener, for an interlocutor. And here we truly see the importance of this kind of conversations. I personally really love Jorge Luis Borges's philosophy of translation, where he says that every text is a draft full of potential, and that translation can open up those hidden potentials. And so we see how these two versions open up different potentials of Volha's poem. And how we already have Maryja's father as a part of our conversation, for instance. We're talking about the heart of the whole country, but also about a heart of a person who is somebody's kin, somebody's family, right? Somebody's life. I would like to say a few words about what Maryja was quoting there. She said that the heart was going, was walking. So in Belarusian, the movement of the heart, the beating of the heart is expressed as walking. So a heart walks. And it's quite important in the context of the protests, because one of the slogans of the protest is, "I'm walking out, I'm walking." We were saying that the protests in Belarus are peaceful, and all people do is walk on the street. So Nina Bahinskaya, the legend of Belarusian protest, says, "I'm just walking." Roman Bondarenko's last text message in the group chat was, "I'm walking out." So this idea of walking is very symbolic here. And could we bring the text back, or do we all now have the PDF open? Oh, there, thank you. So I just would like to look at the beginning of the poem, where the heart is walking, right? It's beating, and then it zamerla, which is a very interesting word, zamerla, right? We could say stopped, as we see in Hanna's translation, stopped, though it's not a full stop. Zamerla is not a full stop, but perhaps an equivalent in English would be to freeze, right? For a moment, to freeze for a moment. I looked in the dictionary and I also saw to miss a beat, which is very interesting for our heart context here, for the language of the heart. So the heart of my country has missed a beat. It kind of froze in its steps in the context of walking for a moment. Though zamerla, the root here is merl, помирать. So to замереть, to stop here is to die for a moment. So this is this loaded verb that we have here. And so we could think about its etymology, its connection to death, but at the same time, we think about the idea of walking and stopping as a contemporary context of a Belarusian protest here. And so it's interesting, in Hanna's translation, we have stop, it isn't beating, it's not walking, it's the third line, не иди, it's not walking, it isn't beating. And in Maryja's translation, and we already know that Maryja is thinking that she has to produce a different version. She has to show that the joy of translation is in the fact of many versions. So she's looking for alternative solutions here intentionally. And so she uses a very loaded word, arrested, heart arrest, but also, of course, the context of endless arrests in Belarus right now. And then her translation of the third line, not walking, not beating, literally in Hanna's translation is for Maryja, failed. So there is that heart failure. And I wonder what it says about that sense of hope and hopelessness, because there is a protest going on and people are hoping not to fail. So this is us close reading just three short lines right here. Maryja,
I translated it in winter, not in autumn. It's another emotional situation. But sorry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this is a wonderful observation, because normally we would say that we need a new translation for a text in each new generation. But the events in Belarus are developing so intensely and so fast that we need a fall translation, we need a winter translation, and we will need a spring translation soon. And then, are there any comments here about what I'm talking about from our translators? I guess I should very quickly translate for Volha. Volha, я вельми хутенько, буде задовго для вас. Я разбирала 3 першие радки, казала про этимологію слова «замерла», і яго сувязь са смерцю, якая губляецца у перакладзе, пра тое, што такое ідці, і як гэты сэнс хадзьбы звязаны з пратэстам. Я выходжу, я гуляю, сэрца ідзе, і таму тут мы глядзім углуб, у мінулае, у этымалогію і адначасова у наш цяперашні час. І вось мы параўноўвалі пераклады і казалі, што усе гэтыя пераклады патрэбныя, не ў кожным пакаленні новы пераклад, а ў нас тут атрымліваецца ў кожным сезоне новы пераклад. If anybody has any questions or comments for us, do come in.
We do have one question. Sorry to interrupt. This has been such a lovely conversation. We did have one question that I just wanted to pass along. Let me scroll down to it. There are times when peoples under oppression turn to coded language. Is there in the original or intentionally in these two translations code words hidden or in plain sight?
I wonder what is meant here. I will redirect this question to our poet, but I wonder what is meant here by coded words. I think that poets traditionally use metaphor and irony, all right, parallels and oppositions in order to bring together, in order to create these new meanings. Perhaps code is a little word that is a little off for me here, because a poem is not a riddle, not a code to be solved, but a poet asks us questions that perhaps the state ideology doesn't want us to ask. And she does that through her choice of words, through her metaphor. In this case, this poem is has an extended metaphor here, but also this metaphor is built on a contrast between the language of violence and detentions and medical language. Вольга, у нас пытанне про закадзіраваную мову паэтаў, пра тое, як паэты хаваюць нейкія сакрэтныя коды у вершы. Я крыху не пагадзілася з такой фармуліроўкаю, казала, што верш наўрад ці код, які трэба разгадаць, хутчэй гэта пытанні, якія паэт задае, калі вось, напрыклад, стварае такую метафору, у якой нас запрашае падумаць пра мову гвалту дзяржаўнага і пра нашыя сардэчныя справы, як фізічныя, так і эмацыйныя. Ці ёсць у вас тут нейкія каментары пра тое, што тут схавана у вашым вершы?
Я б не сказала, што гэта нейкая сакрэтная мова таксама, і гэта не стваралася дзеля таго, каб загадаць загадку і каб хтосьці гэта расшыфроўваў і знаходзіў нейкія адказы. Проста на самой справе пайшло ад гэтага вобразу сэрца, якое спынілася на нейкі час, спынілася на нейкае імгненне, і пайшла зноў-такі медычная тэматыка, таму што для мяне, як і для Марыі, гэта досыць асабістая гісторыя, таксама праз бацьку, я ў курсе ўсіх гэтых тэрмінаў, і па гэтаму праз блакаду, напэўна. Першая была блакада, і потым ўсё гэта так закруцілася ў адзін вір, і я не магу сказаць, што гэта наўмысна нейкі сакрэт загаданы мной. Хутчэй проста яно як напісалася, так і стварылася. Гэта не лагічная загадка якая.
Дякую. I see Larissa turned her camera on. What does it mean?
We are very close to our ending, and this has just been such a wonderful conversation. I'm so glad to have you all with us, and I personally love the idea of a heart walking. I think that's great. So I'm really pleased to know that that's the way that you say it in Belarusian too. Like that just adds something for me. So I believe that we were going to have a moment. So I'm going to pass it back to you. But then after this, I think that we are at the end of our event. But I have been posting periodically links to places where you can find more information about the situation that the poets and have all passed along to me. There's also some links to donate if you're interested. I'm going to work with PEN to perhaps get the translations on the PEN website and all of these resources as well. So just keep circling back to PEN America, and we'll have more for you there. But thank you everyone for being here, and then it's been quite an honor.
Well, thank you so much, Larissa, and thank you so much for American PEN, also for Belarusian PEN that has been monitoring and sharing the information about illegal detentions and about the lives and fates of Belarusian artists. I'm very grateful for Larissa for sharing these links. Some of them are for donation campaigns, so you could donate to some money to support Belarusian artists in their projects, but also to pay the fines that they are given by the government when they're detained. That's very important. Legal help but also there are links to just sources, news sources, where you could read about the developments in Belarus so that you do not leave these events in silence and in the darkness somewhere, so that you keep it visible and you do not avert your eyes from this real tragedy that is unfolding in the center of the European continent. So thank you for these links. Thank you to American PEN and to the Nuyorican Cafe. And right now we have prepared something special for you. We thought of the best way to wrap up our event would be to have a moment of silence. in the honor of people who have been persecuted in Belarus for simply being human, being alive in Belarus, being born in Belarus. As I was saying in my introduction, for calling violence violence, but sometimes just for walking out to pick up their child from school or to buy milk at the grocery store. So we will have a moment of silence, and in this moment, you will see the names of the people who have suffered from the authoritarian Belarusian regime just in this past year. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, our wonderful poets. Дякую великі поетки. Зараз у нас буде хвилина мовчання, і ми побачимо ім'яни білоруських діячів культури. Лариса підрихтувала для нас слайди.